asked to talk about standards and innovation. And do standards constrain innovation? Or do standards provide a platform in which innovation can thrive? So we'll talk a little bit about what a standard is and the ecosystem around a standard. And we'll talk about how innovation interacts with standards. And then we'll also look at what happens when standards go wrong, when standards fail the industry. How do we recover from that situation? And then to finish off, we'll look at where the future innovation is going to come. And I'm going to look at this. Standards field is huge, so I'm going to look at this from a payment acceptance point of view and talk about standards and payments acceptance. So, first question, I'll do a show of hands, like Santiago. How many people work in standards? Quite a few. How many people work in innovation? How many people have applied for a waiver? The payments industry runs on waivers, but it's really important. Okay, so why am I talking to you here? At Consult Hyperion, we write a lot of standards. A lot of the payment standards we use today, we're sitting behind a great many of them. We write standards for payments, we write standards for transit systems, and we write standards for identity systems. But we also do innovation. We have a lot of our clients come to us and say, I've got this brilliant idea. How do I get it to market? How do I get a waiver which allows me to deploy? And how does it eventually become a standard so that it becomes legitimized? So we've got experience in taking people through all this process, and we can see both sides of the coin. So let's start. How do standards work? What's the ecosystem around a standard? And how do standards evolve? So, standard ecosystem, you have your payment standard, whatever it may be. But a payment standard doesn't work on its own. You need a test plan. And if you get a test plan, you need a test tool. And if you've got a test tool, you need test cases, so you can test it all. But then if you want to deploy it, you need a certification program. And if you get a certification program, you need a certification labs. And for certification labs, you need a qualification program behind that. And then to evolve the standard, you need implementation guys to tell people how to use the standard. And you need a maintenance program to keep it all together. Now that's a huge cost. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of time and effort involved in creating, maintaining, and operating a standard. And it's really important. You just need to think about that a standard, you need a business case sitting behind a standard. So how do standards evolve? Well, from the maintenance program. So people will submit change controls. The maintenance program will have program managers and product managers that will come up with new features which will need to go into that standards. During the time, errata or specification bulletins will come out, which will work with the standard and then feed into the next version of the standard, along with the test programs, etc. And then they move on. And what you get is a predictable release of new versions of the standard, because that's what we want. That feeds into our product roadmaps and allows us to understand where we need to be and what we need to be in terms of cost and effort. Now, so what about innovation? Generally, innovation is based around a standard. There's something which exists which people want to actually work from. So someone has a bright idea, it's based on a standard, and then you've got to develop that idea and get it through a waiver process. And that waiver process allows you to deploy your product for a period of time under constraints. And you don't really want to be under constraint. You really want to be under a standard, under a specification. So what you really want then is that waiver or that innovation to feed into the standard, and so you have a legitimate product which you can move forward with. But what if your innovation is so different that it doesn't fit with an existing standard? What if you have to create a whole new standard to work with it? Jeremy and I were speaking about this last night, that before PCI create a new standard, they have to think, is there a market for this standard? Are we going to spend all this money creating this ecosystem? And are people going to come and join and work with it? And it's quite a consideration to think about it. The other type of waiver is saying your product doesn't comply, but we'll let you deploy for a while whilst you fix it. That's not really where you want to go. But where you really don't want to be is where you do your innovation, you create your product, and the responsible bodies say no, because you just spent a whole pile of time and effort within that. We really want to be in moving the existing standard on or generating new standards. So let's look at soft pause. Soft pause is where innovation drove the standards. There weren't any standards. Then the innovation came along in a new form, and standards had to play catch up in that space. In the beginning, there was PCI PTS, and this basically says all the hardware terminals where we insert our cards, tap our cards, are really secure. But then someone looked at it and said, well, there's this host card emulation where you can use your mobile phone to be a card. So why can't we turn that around and use your mobile phone to be a payment terminal? And can we do it securely in the manner which PCI intended? And so some clever people got together and they thought about it and they worked on the idea. And eventually WorldPay launched My Business Mobile, which is the first tap-to-phone solution. And in parallel behind them, they spoke to MasterCard Visa, got the waiver, and were allowed to deploy in the numbers. And then behind them, the whole industry started to develop and come along with that. So we have Deja Mobile, MyPinPad, FOS. There's a whole pile of players sitting in this industry. And everyone's working under waiver, and that doesn't allow the industry to develop and reach the volume it needs. And so PCI created the CPOC standard, which is great. So we have a tap-on phone standard, which then people can deploy. Unfortunately, CPOC came along at the same time as PCI PTS. Not PCI PTS, PSD2. And PSD2 says, you need SCA. Well, we've got a no CVM acceptance product, which can't do SCA. So we don't have an industry. We've just spent a whole pile of money developing this new industry and this new way to accept payments, and it doesn't work anymore. It's fine in the US, but they don't care things about authentication. So people started thinking, well, there's this pin-on-glass solution that the MPOS guys are using. What if we take pin-on-glass and combine it with our tap-to-phone solution? Brilliant. Except having the PIN and the PAN together in software is a really bad idea. A really, really bad idea. You don't want to do that, as the threat environment is so high. And so the innovation is around how you manage that and how you create the secure environment and secure way in which you can capture these two pieces of information, which, if combined, give you the right to make a payment, withdraw money from ATMs. So this is it's actually quite a difficult thing to do. But people in the industry worked out how to do it. They went through the waiver program, and the waiver program here was a serious program. They built the certification labs, and everything that was needed to go through it was all put in place. And then PCI created the MPOC standard. And this MPOC standard is really important because this legitimizes the whole industry. If you're a company and you're operating on a waiver and you're looking for investment, well, there's a bit of concern there. But once you're in the standard and you're operating against the standard, that gives the investors a lot more confidence in what you're able to do. And to give you an idea of the timescales we're looking at here, 2017 is when we first started to see the CPOC work coming along through the waiver programs. And last year is when we got the MPOC standard. And we'll start to see products qualified against that this year. So we're looking about a 6-7 year time frame in this evolution and development of new payments methods. So what about when it goes wrong? And the best example of when it goes wrong is contactless payments. Now, but contactless payments works really well, doesn't it? Everybody uses it. What's wrong? Well, what's wrong with contactless payments is we have the 6 EMVCo members: American Express, Visa, MasterCard, Discover, Union, Pay, JCB. And they set the global standards here. But there are about 30 domestic payment schemes and payment networks who also do contactless payments around the world. And unlike when you insert a card where you have one standard, EMV level 2, to make contactless payments work, we have 22 standards. There's 22 different ways you can tap a card to a phone and actually make that thing work. Now, that's 22 different ecosystems. That's 22 different certification programs and test tools. And so engineers are basically spending their whole time working through certification rather than being freed up to innovate. And this is holding people back, and this is just a huge amount of money that the industry could really do without. So EMVCo last year, they released the EMV contactless kernel, sometimes called ECK or kernel 8. And this is a really important standard because this takes us back to where we were in the contact side of things, where we have one standard which allows multiple configurations, multiple products to be used against that standard. It works on existing point of sale, so we don't have to change the point of sale network. It upgrades the cryptography. We've got ECC and we've got AES built into the standards. And the one thing you always hear about contactless is someone can sniff the data between the card and the reader. We've got a secure channel in kernel 8. So we're taking the opportunity to move contactless on and update contactless to where it needs to be. And this is really important. It's cloud ready. It's been architected differently. And cloud ready is really important because think of the innovation you can do if you start to put this stuff in the cloud. What does that mean for your reader? And it's royalty free. You don't have to pay someone to make use of it. Now, it's going to take several years to move from where we are today to a kernel 8 world, but that journey is going to be worthwhile because it's going to free up people that can then spend time on innovation rather than just standing still and making sure that you meet all the requirements and specifications that you need to meet. So what's next in standards and innovation? Well, let's join the dots. What if you put kernel 8 into an MPOC device where you connect it to the cloud? What does that mean for a reader? You can reduce the complexity of the reader enormously, and you can increase the acceptance footprint. And so we're going to see a lot of innovation which is going to grow the acceptance capability for contactless payments. So, summarize standards and innovation. They work together. You can't have innovation without standards, and you can't have standards which don't allow innovation. A good standard and a good set of standards provides the platform where people can innovate and innovate on the products and services that work for them and work for their customers. A bad standard will inhibit innovation. So we need to work on where we're going to ensure that we produce good standards and we produce that innovation, because that's what we want to be able to deliver for everyone. Thank you very much.